everyone, and welcome back to the Better Advertising with Better Media podcast. Today, I'm incredibly excited to have the fantastic Julian on the podcast. I have been a big follower, I'd say, on LinkedIn. I think we've had a mutual respect for each other for quite some time. And one of the reasons I was excited to bring you on the podcast is you have an incredible background. You have worked every side of the business possible, coming from Amazon to tech to brand side. And you are currently the Ecom Growth Manager at Ansel, which I think brings a wide breadth of experience to the podcast. So, Julian, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And before we dive in, I wanted to ask you a question. Coming from the background that you have, what would you say your superpower is, especially in relation to e-commerce and Amazon?
I think it's data, understanding trends, and knowing how to leverage those insights into actionable things that make us some more money.
How do you begin to consume the wide breadth of data that we have at our fingertips?
I think it starts with defining your success metrics, right? What is your goal for today? Is it better organic ranking? Is it better efficiency on your ad spend? Is it increased glance views through your positioning? So what is the output you're looking for, and then what metrics really drive that output? So if I'm looking for additional glance views, what can I do to do that? Well, I can advertise, I can optimize for search in my title, my bullet points, and all of that to increase organic relevancy. Or if I'm looking to, say, increase my conversion rate, maybe the lever that needs to be pulled is to update primary images to increase click-through and increase conversion, because you're moving to a new plateau in terms of the sophistication of what you're showing off for your brand or for the product that you're selling as a 3P or however you're managing.
How frequently do you find that those KPIs change with the stage of business you're in? And as a manager managing multiple teams, how frequently do you take a look at those KPIs and say, yeah, let's shift those?
Yeah, so I would say literally every company and every category I've ever managed is on its own journey and on a different point in that journey. I've worked with companies who are like, hey, let's start Amazon, and we're literally on day one as a brand. Maybe 3Ps, resellers already have all your listings up and everything. Maybe they don't. Maybe you are actually net new to Amazon. And then I go as far as companies that are extremely advanced and sort of market leaders in their group. And so it's really all over the place. Right now I manage 3 different categories for Ansel, and even within those 3 categories, I find that there's a huge difference in terms of the tactics and strategies I need to use to drive growth for those categories. And in terms of KPIs, I mean, I'm a data hawk, and I'm very data driven. I like to joke that I don't make decisions, I just do what data tells me to. And it's really kind of true. So I would say, my primary KPIs, depending on what my goal is, I'm probably looking at least weekly, at the very most monthly. And some of those things I'm looking at every day, even like, say, my ROAS through ads, and I utilize PackView for ads. Shout out to PackView. Great product. But I'm in there making micro adjustments every day to hit a ROAS target, or to try to increase my impressions, or again, whatever's needed for that category at that time.
That makes sense. And I was actually interested to have a tech conversation because it's something that comes up frequently on our end. Your strength is data. For a lot of people, that may not be their strength. And you've worked all 3 sides of the business. How do you feel like brands should decide when to build in-house capabilities, when to rely on agency partnerships, or when they really need to incorporate some level of SaaS, whether it's for things like share of voice and market share tracking, or as simple as bid optimization and keyword harvesting? Have you found any consistencies across the board in that area?
I think there are some things that are best practice for a company, regardless of where they are on their journey, whether you're 3P FBA or you're a 1P, assuming you are the brand owner in this case. I've managed businesses that were $2 to $3 million a year, and For those, we would utilize SaaS. We would have tools for keywords. I would utilize a PackView or an IntentWise or a Tecometrics. Now, which piece of ad tech you use depends on the level, the size of your business. But there are certain things that I think are just best practice, like to run at any scale, to try to run ads on your own through Ad Console is crazy, in my opinion. There's so much, for the account I'm running today. PackView will make 36 million bid adjustments for me in the next 365 days. You simply can't do that yourself, right? So if you're in a growth mindset, I think there are certain things that, regardless of where you're at, are going to help run the business more effectively, more efficiently. And I think finding those automations is really important. But then there are, there is some difference, I think, depending on whether you're 3P, whether you're 1P, and sort of the size of the business that you're trying to manage. So for a $1 million a year business, maybe having like a Gatita or a company that's doing reimbursements, you might not need that. It might actually be easier for you to have that in-house, have an e-com specialist who's managing, let's say, order entry, reimbursements, and seller or vendor central disputes, right? But if you're a $100 million company, and I've been at that scale as well, again, it's as you scale, I think you need to automate more and more, and a lot of it really depends on the size of the business and where is that tipping point between a human that has 40 hours a week being the most efficient path and some sort of automation, even like looking at POs, right? Ansel just acquired the PPE business from Kimberly-Clark Corporation, and I was part of that conveyance. So, at the size they are right now, we're actually doing our orders manually, and that's okay for the size of the business today. 2 years from now, that's not going to be manageable. It's not going to be scalable. So now we're talking about, okay, how do we look at EDIs and how do we kind of think about a new process in order to make this manageable at scale? It's really all about thinking ahead to the next set of hurdles and figuring out, getting ahead of that. And then whether you do things in-house or whether you farm it out. My experience has been, I think when you're a third-party FBA, a lot more tends to happen in-house. And I think a lot of that's just because you understand that it's a high overhead operation, but you also control your own margins, and there's a lot that you can do there. One of the big advantages of 1P, particularly for large multinational corporations, is it's just a traditional PO model. And so, you can just kind of ingest those POs, sort of let the business kind of manage itself. And then to use an agency or someone to manage your advertising and sort of manage that other stuff, it allows you to access Amazon, but keep your overhead really low, and limit the number of full-time employees you have dedicated to the Amazon channel. That being said, I think personally I've seen more success, whether it's 1P or 3P, when we bring things in-house, because I'm a pretty firm believer that nobody understands a brand as well as the brand, and the goals of agencies don't necessarily align with the goals of the business, especially if your goal is changing all the time because you're thinking about different levers. But there are definitely times when agencies make a lot of sense. The other time I would say agencies make a lot of sense is at the beginning of the journey, right? Somebody to help you get all your listings set up, make sure they're actually compliant, make sure that the content is good. I've seen brands kind of launch themselves and you're like, oh boy. So agencies can really help at the beginning of your journey as an advisor, right? As somebody who can kind of walk you through, these first few baby steps. So it's almost like those two extremes are the best times to have an agency, whether it's for cost savings and efficiency, or if it's to make sure you're leading with your best foot forward because you don't know what you're doing just yet.
I would love to present a fun agency challenge here. I think there's a lot we could dive into. in all of that. And I think one of the biggest things I've seen across the board is it really depends on knowing your strengths. You threw out PackView, and I'm very, very familiar with PackView and the majority of the tool providers in the space. I've done a lot of work. I've previewed, and most of the founders I would say I'm relatively close with. And PackView is actually a fantastic example because I think PackView has really set the bar for Amazon advertising and retail media. I think they've done a fantastic job on the enterprise side of the space. But I've also spoken with a lot of brands who think PackView will fix their business. What they don't realize is, in my opinion, you need to know ads incredibly well in order to utilize PackView to its full potential. It's not easy, it's not seamless, and it's not a full automation that's going to be hands-off. So a lot of mid-size or smaller brands may join PackView thinking it's going to be the quick fix because PackView is managing XYZ competitors or the top sellers in the space, and they realize, I need a team to manage PackView. You do, and I think that's why the hyper-awareness around your strengths matters a ton. If you have a team that's hands-on keyboard and compete head-to-head with an agency in terms of everything the new that's being rolled out, the in-depth strategy required to fully understand Amazon ads, then a tool like PackView is going to be fantastic because it's going to integrate really close. But if you have a team that's spread across retail and ads and ops and commerce, and their time is, 1,000 feet wide rather than a mile deep, then that's where you're going to need a different level of automation or agency to work with. And that's kind of really important to call out because really the partners you have starts within your own internal org chart. And I think a lot of people miss that. They get caught up in the sales pitch or the shiny objects in the industry, and they maybe forget that they need to take a really deep look at their internal team and figure out how it's going to be integrated seamlessly. I think on the agency side, that's something that we harp on pretty in depth. I mean, we've managed the full gamut, I would say. We started with sellers and new to Amazon brands, and then we've also managed some of the largest enterprise in the space. And it really depends on that core focus and that team. It's not easy. Like, I'm sure there's changes every week on Amazon, and that's why I always challenge that. Like, from our end, that's our skill set. We're a boutique premium agency. We're, directly partnered with Amazon in that regard. And I guarantee you, my team will stay up to date with everything much quicker than a typical brand team because brand teams are typically diluted across multiple verticals. But then the question of 80-20 comes up, which is usually the next question. And it's kind of, Julian, to your point of database decisions, it's what's going to drive the most value? It's your bid ops, your keyword research, and that's where the agency play and the software play gets a little bit murky.
I think that's a really good thing to call out because I am not hands-on keyboard with advertising for this for 6 years of my journey, right? Because I still had a lot to learn. It's only been in the past couple of years that I have the ability to manage. I'm managing 1,000 campaigns right now, something like that. And you really do have to be fully focused on Amazon in order to do that well as a brand. In fact, I've worked with companies who have used PackView or Techometrics or similar products, and they were just we turned it off because it wasn't, to your point, it wasn't getting it done for us. And it's well, let's talk about your strategy and your data. And it's and a lot of the time when it comes down to is that the people who are hands-on keyboard don't understand the ecosystem well enough to manage it effectively. And that ability to have very focused subject matter expertise around something like ads is definitely a place where agencies can really shine. I'm fortunate that I am able to spend 90% of my time on Amazon, and I've been doing it for almost 10 years now. So it's a challenge every day, but I can look at my inputs, I can make decisions, and I can run that business effectively. For a lot of people, PackView is not going to. It's not a silver bullet. You still have to understand what kind of campaigns am I going to run, what keywords am I going to run, product targeting, DSP, audience targeting. You still have to understand all the things that happen there. And without a ton of training or a ton of experience, it's really easy to get lost. And I think I have seen brands try to kind of do it themselves because they're we'll save money this way, but then your ROAS is a 0.2, And it's like, well, maybe not so much, right? So I do believe bringing things in-house can be advantageous, but you have to have the expertise to back it up. And to your point, a lot of companies, they're not ready for that. And they need someone like you to guide them on that journey. They need an agency to really steer that ship, possibly indefinitely. For some companies that makes sense, and for others it's steer the ship until they're able to take it and run with it themselves.
100%. I think that opens up a key point we discussed before we even hit record, and it's around education. I think that's what's grown a lot of our reputation in the space, is leading with education, and we're pretty transparent around all the strategies we recommend and how we break up our campaign structure and how we focus on organic rank and the tie-in with advertising and retail. But if you're going to make that bet and you're going to hire in-house, you really need to stay up to date with everything that's happening in the space. And I think there's a lot of good resources out there, but there's a lot of people out there that are posting content for the sake of content that you can get lost in. So is there anything that you found to be key to your journey in helping you stay up to date while still managing hands-on keyboard?
Yeah, I would say there's two things. One, we participate with Amazon Vendor Services, and so, which I used to be a senior account manager with Amazon Vendor Services, so they're near and dear to my heart. I actually trained my replacement, who I'm working with today. But having them on our side, and I think the 1P model is moving towards more businesses utilizing that internal service. They tend to keep us up to date on a lot of things. And then Amazon Ads, if you're a large enough 1P vendor, they'll keep you up to speed on things. And I'm fortunate to be in, enterprise businesses who do have those direct connections. But the other source that's there for everybody is LinkedIn. And I spend probably 20 to 40 minutes a day on LinkedIn every single day, taking screenshots of really, really helpful bits of information. Many of those screenshots are you. It's just figuring out, and to your point, who the real experts are, as opposed to folks that are just like, oh, look at the numbers I produced, but I'm not going to here's my chart, but I'm not going to tell you what I did to get there. It's like, okay, that's cool. You can brag, fine. We've all got cool charts to share, but what's really interesting and engaging is when you take that next step. I'll give a shout out in particular to a guy named Martin Hubel. He is, in my opinion, towards the top of the stack in terms of 1P consultants, and I made my switch from the 3P universe to the 1P universe. I spent a lot of time reading his material, and there's a few other people too that are really focused on 1P, because it is a different beast from 3P. You have annual vendor negotiations. You have to make sure Amazon's making their margins so you don't go into crap status at the ASIN level. I mean, there's all these things that you don't have to think about when you're on the 3P side. And so LinkedIn, I mean, it's really phenomenal. And then there's, webinars and a bunch of newsletters that I'm on, a company called Stratably. I love their weekly newsletter. They are entirely data focused, so it really works for the way I think about business. And they have a lot of really cool insights, whether it's around how Amazon's performing, or sometimes getting into these little niche areas, or looking at e-commerce versus brick and mortar. All these different things. So I think, if you don't have the direct access to Amazon, LinkedIn's your best friend to keep up to speed, but you got to put the time in, and you got to know who to follow, and really pay attention to whether those folks are just trying to get clicks and get exposure, or whether they're really trying to educate. And there are folks in the space who are really trying to educate, and it's free learning, other than the cost of your time.
Most definitely. On the note of Amazon, I also just want to give a shout out to the Amazon partner team in general. I think their accreditations have improved tenfold. When I got started, I remember learning PPC bid optimization from a podcast, and I don't even remember who it was. I'm aging myself in this space, but I think I've been doing this for going on 8 years now. And now they have a full training program. And at Better Media, we have put interns out of high school through the Amazon accreditation program and had them hands-on keyboard in accounts, managing in the back end, and typically a sandbox environment, within 60 days. And a lot of people don't realize they have access to that. So if anyone's interested in the space or just wants to keep up, go to Amazon Advertising and look at the blog. look at their newsletter, all of the new beta rollouts. They have integrations to make that almost seamless. I mean, we have Slack integrations right now. Every new update from the API is sent to a Slack channel so our whole team can realize, oh, hey, this is amazing. You know, Amazon's moving into sponsor brands themes, or Amazon's now starting to move into some more contextual targeting with sponsored products. Like, you have to be that deep because Amazon really moves that quick. And to your point, how do you then filter what works best for you? And I think that's where some of the industry experts come into play. That's where the people like Martin, or I'll give a shout out to Serena's newsletter. I know that's one that we listen to a lot when it comes to AMC and DSP. It's really finding a place to digest and piece together what is now best for your brand based off the KPIs and based off, you know, the team strengths that you and I have been discussing for the last 20 minutes. Those can all be incredibly helpful to sort through the weeds, but you have to stay on top of it. What are you most excited about? I mean, you've been in this space for a while. There's a lot of really big changes lately. What are you most excited about in the next 2 to 3 years?
That's a great question. I mean, at a personal level, I'm really excited about the opportunity to grow the business I just joined. I mean, we are still getting used to that transition. You know, we're at a point on our journey where like explosive growth is possible. And every time we've gone down that path, I mean, it's a wild ride, and it tends to be a lot of fun, right? I've 7x, 8x, 10x brands before, and to see that happen in 2-3 years, I mean, it's just fun. It's just really fun. And then, you know, something else I'm really looking forward is seeing Amazon Marketing Cloud get to a new level. I think everybody's there, right? And there are folks like Srinath who have done an incredible job of recognizing the potential in AMC and creating, you know, technology that makes that accessible to everybody and not just people who are subject matter expertise with SQL, right? Like the fact that AMC today, your queries have to be run using SQL. You literally have to learn a language in order to access that data. But I've also seen that is the most robust data that Amazon has ever given. I mean, you can learn so much. I mean, you know, one of the common ones, honestly, sometimes, but you know, one of the common ones that everybody talks about with AMC is cart abandoners, right? Like that's low-hanging fruit that any business should be retargeting to. But you really couldn't get access to those folks. You could do a view retarget, but a view and a cart abandon is not the same thing. Those are not the same level of buying intent, right? And so to be able to pull things like that, or to be able to pull past to purchase and be like, hey, that share of voice and that DSP, those actually are getting things done, because I struggle being so data focused. I struggle with view through attribution for return on ad spend, right? Like my ROAS isn't actually a 60. If it was, my revenue would be much higher and my ship COGS would be much higher. So, you know, but AMC allows us to kind of see past all of that and really get to see who are our customers, what is their journey like, and where along that journey can we modify or make improvements to ultimately help with conversion. So I think the future for AMC is really bright. I think Amazon has a vested interest in making it more, you know, accessible and user-friendly. But in the meantime, you know, companies that are integrating that into their software platforms, and I'll give a shout out to IntentWise. I think I would argue are leading the pack on that front with AMC. They've really created some stuff that's just point and click, and you get exactly what you're looking for. So I'm excited on that. The other thing I'm excited about in a weird sort of way is seeing how Amazon fares against some of these newer players, right? We've got Temu and Shein coming in, and it's a very different model. Amazon just announced that they're going to start allowing direct import from China to compete with that. You know, how is that going to affect the marketplace for US-based sellers? And how are these competitors going to impact the way we advertise and we think about our position? You know, are we going to have to participate in those marketplaces the same way we have to participate on Amazon? and how is Amazon going to pivot against them? I think this idea of allowing direct import from or direct sales from China is kind of that first step. But I'm excited and maybe a little anxious as well, depending on how I'm thinking about it, for how they may react and pivot to this sort of new competition, and what developments they might come up with to counteract that could be advantageous for all sellers and vendors.
100%. I'm going to circle back on AMC before transitioning to the next one. And AMC is definitely one that we've been excited about. I think it can be a little bit difficult to dive into because it's a buzzword. You have SQL and it's not accessible to everyone. I mean, you should be spending a little bit on DSP before making the investment to AMC, in my opinion. You're not ready if you're spending less than $15,000 a month, though it is valuable. You get access to audiences and different analytics that I think are powerful. But AMC, I think, is going to be a huge unlock as Amazon, one, they've already made some of it no code, which has been a really big update. That was really exciting from accessibility perspective, is being able to have no code, no SQL, and be able to pull some of the analytics we've been talking about. But the secondary part is audiences. And I think audience is really important because Amazon is moving away from strictly bottom of the funnel search based. You have the NBA partnership. We've seen everything being done with Thursday Night Football and Prime ads. And as we start connecting the dots, AMC is basically, here's access to all of the data we've needed to justify some of those decisions and some of those investments. And, attribution is one that used to come up a ton, especially when it was 1P, 3P, and AMS and Seller Central advertising were not connected. I remember we used to, personally work for all the brands who were doing headline search ads and product display ads with a vendor back-end cheat code. And attribution used to always come up, as you mentioned, with view through. And, one of the things you can do with AMC is view your advertising from a linear attribution or from first touch. And those things are what's allowing people to start making better investments into Amazon. And I think kind of transition to that second point of that conversation is, Amazon's making two investments in the space that are, in my opinion, like the antithesis of each other. They're trying to push into general retail media player game with all of the democratizing video and everything. They're pushing upper funnel with DSP. And on the flip side, the antithesis of that is really what they're doing, like you said, to compete with Temu and Shein, is making the investments on like direct to manufacturer and opening up this direct route. And I think it'll be really interesting to see if they can afford to invest in both of those initiatives as a company, or what's going to end up falling through the cracks and not being rolled out appropriately.
Yeah, definitely. And because they I wouldn't say they're mutually exclusive, but they are two very different avenues of attack, let's say. And as I've worked with larger and larger companies, the upper funnel becomes more and more of something you think about when you're running $1 million business. You're not going to spend $15,000 a month on DSP, right? But it sort of just becomes part of what you do when you're at the enterprise level. And before AMC, to be honest, I wasn't always comfortable with that. I'm like, I don't know what I'm getting for my money, but especially being able to do customer journey queries, and it's like, yeah, this person clicked on 3 DSP ads, and then they clicked on what we call a share of voice, which is more of a merchandising the marketing, or advertising, but either way. And then they saw a sponsored products ad, and then they converted. And it's like, okay, yes, DSP did pull them down towards the bottom of the funnel, and we did get an actual conversion out of that. Being able to see that path to purchase, it not only makes me feel more comfortable with my decision making, but as I'm working for large companies for which e-com is just one little piece, well, now I have a talk track for my leadership to say, here's why we're spending X amount on DSP per month. This is our customer journey. This is our top customer path. Look at how many times DSP get hit on that. If we take all of that away, maybe the business doesn't shrink, but it's also not going to grow sustainably. You really do, when you're thinking about the long term, you need to understand that the full funnel matters. I mean, why does Coca-Cola still run TV ads, right? Everybody in the world knows what Coca-Cola is,
All about
literally.
being top of mind at the right time.
Exactly.
That's something we've seen the younger generations really, I don't want to say invest in, but I think have a different path to purchase than maybe older generations. We're very familiar with radio, TV, billboards, and we kind of understand, hey, we may drive down the interstate, drive down 95, see a billboard, and go into my nearest Publix and buy a Coke. Gen Z is going to be scrolling TikTok. They're scrolling TikTok. They're jumping to Instagram. They're following their favorite influencers. Maybe they look up on Netflix and they see a slot with someone holding a Coca-Cola, and they're like, hey, next time I stop by a gas station, I really want a Diet Coke. And that's truly how consumers shop. And I know, funny enough, like you mentioned, being a database person, it's how do you pull yourself out of the weeds occasionally and say, hey, let's go from data to psychology and consider how consumers shop. AMC is giving us the power to combine those two. It's giving us the power to unlock both brand marketers, shopper marketing budgets in one, and really, really unlock a level of performance that's never been available before.
Yeah, I would agree, because that consumer psychology, that's typically hard to quantify, right? I mean, if you're a huge brand, you can do a market study for $100,000 or whatever and learn a little bit from yeah, that's all. But short of that, it is really hard to, or it has been really hard to unlock the psychology end. And that is a really important call out. I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's not just about following data. You do have to understand who your segments are, how they shop, and you have to be, I always say you've got to fish when the fish are biting, right? Like, I can run an ad at 1 a.m., but the data tells me not to. And the fact that I'm primarily running a B2B business also tells me my customers probably aren't shopping for my product at 1 a.m. So let's not advertise at 1 a.m. every night, But there is this component of the behavior that before AMC was really hard to access. You really had to make a lot of assumptions about how your customers were behaving, but now you can really see this is exactly how they got to your product. Was that an efficient path? Is it a replicable path? Are there any adjustments we'd want to make to that path that could possibly, convert at a higher rate or get somebody to purchase a little faster? So it is blending the psychology piece, which is, I'm not as strong on, because I'm a data focused guy. But it allows us to have the data to back up the behavior, to say, oh, okay, for me, that's when I have the aha moments. It's like, oh, duh. Like, oh, yeah, of course they're going here, and this age group is on TikTok, and this age group is, responding to my STV ads. Like, yeah, like it starts to make sense. And it can be, because behavior it can be quantifiable, but it's primarily qualitative in nature. And so to be able to bring those together is super powerful unlock. And for me has been really helpful to take some of that burden away and just say, no, I want to look at this segment or this audience, and then allow Amazon to help me figure out what that group is and what the potential within that group is.
Well, I think that was a little bit of a mic drop moment, and probably a good place to put a little bow on this episode. And Julian, again, thank you so much for joining. This has been absolutely fantastic. Getting your perspective from all angles of the business, I think, was very valuable for our audience. Is there anything else that you want to add or shout out?
No, that might be the hardest question of the entire day.
Hey, I have a bunch of notes. We called out a lot of experts in the space, a lot of different partners, so that was amazing.
Yeah, I will say, if you're looking for safety glasses, CleanGuard is a great brand, and if you're looking for personal protective equipment, Ansel's a great brand to work with as well. So give those brands a look next time you're on Amazon if that's a product you're looking for.
Amazing. I'm sure we'll drop some links in this podcast episode. As always, thank you all so much for listening and for following. If you love this, definitely give us a like and a share on LinkedIn. Again, that's where Julie and I got connected in the first space. So I am 100% confident he'll accept your connection request after this episode. And thank you all so much. See ya.
Thank you. Bye-bye.